which is the Leaders Forum, Deciphering Water, Energy, Environment Nexus through Multi-sectoral Dialogues. May I request all of our esteemed speakers to please join us on stage. May I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Eddie Morse, Rector, IHE Delft Institute of Water Education. We warmly welcome Mr. Rajan Ratna, Deputy Head, UNS Camp. A warm welcome to Mr. Saraswati Prasad, Senior Advisor, UN Ops. May I invite Mr. Anshul Jain, Convener, Indo-Nordic Water Forum, Embassy of Finland, to please join us on stage. A warm welcome to Dr. Kapil Narula, Senior Analyst, Breakthrough Agenda, Climate Champions Team, and Ms. Shweta Tyagi, Chief Functionary, India Water Foundation, who is also the moderator for this session. A very warm welcome to all the esteemed panelists who are now with us on the dais. May I first invite Dr. Eddie Morse. He is Rector of IHE Delft Institute for Water Education and also holds the position of Professor Water and Climate at VIG University, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. He started his career at the World Meteorological Organization, working in Africa and the Caribbean. Before coming to Delft, he worked at Wageningen University and Research, and is also the Associate Editor of Environmental Science and Policy. May I request him to kindly share his presentation and articulate his thoughts.
Thank you very much. Yes, and thank you also for starting the presentation. I would like to share a few words with you. It's a little bit at the global level, but I think as you heard this morning, also at the earlier presentations, there is, I think, a very strong need actually to work on the water sector. And I think what also became quite clear from the words that were said this morning is that the water sector is oh, should I speak up? This better? So the water sector is very important if you also look at the other sustainability development goals. And one of the things that also at least ringed my mind this morning was also mentioned that if you want to make a difference, and the biggest polluter is poverty. I think if you want to change something in poverty, it's not necessarily a monetary thing only. I think poverty also has to do with a lot of other inspirational and other sorts. And one of the things to improve actually the livelihood and the quality of life is also about education. So that's also a little bit my background. So I'm a little bit biased to that, so apologies for that. So my bias is education and water. But I would like to take you on board on a couple of points here. One, you all well known, this is a case from India. And in India, what it shows here is actually the energy needs that you need for the production of wheat and rice. So those are the two figures that you see on screen here. And those energy needs you can also translate into an economic value. So those are the costs that you have to make. And why do I think this is important for what we're talking about? We're talking about the water, energy and environmental nexus, but I also think that the water, energy and food nexus is strongly linked to that. So this is a picture of the water, energy and food nexus. And why is that there? And that is because for a lot of the production of wheat and rice, you need water. And water is being pumped up. And that pumping, that's costing energy, and by energy it also costs investments, either in solar power that you have to generate, or it can be in the cost if you need other fuels to pump up this water. Now, why is that so interesting? That is because not only for a manager or a responsibility for a certain region that has to produce food, but also one water manager is taking care of the water resources. You have the energy provider, And what's happening there is that you can make a decision depending on the cost on where you would like to invest in. Which crop would you like to produce? How much water is available? What extra investments do you want to make, or do you need to make actually to make this production of food possible? Why I think this is also important, because it shows a little bit the difference in the cost that you make, in this case between wheat and rice. Of course you cannot just exchange them, but there are other crops and other ways of cultivating what you could use. But why it's also interesting is if you look at the case of India, you also see this lowering of the groundwater table. Of course, that has an impact on a lot of people, not only on the farmers, but also on other people that are using the groundwater table. But another thing is, by the lowering of the groundwater table, you have to overcome a bigger head, hydraulic head, to pump up the water. So you need more energy to pump up the water. So you have this relationship that the production of food is becoming more expensive because of the lowering of the groundwater table. Another important thing here is, and I will not show that to you, but I just want to mention it, is this is a static picture. So this is just from one occasion or an average occasion. But if you look over the years, and that was mentioned also in the earlier session, you see that also because of climate change, the availability of water is becoming more and more erratic. So that also means that it's more difficult to know how much water is available. So how much extra water you need, for example, from groundwater systems or from reservoirs. So here I think there is a very strong link between climate change, so the weather, the link between the food production that you need, the link between energy, and for a part you can govern it also through economic values that are related to all those three sectors. What I also think is that the nexus, so I'm now talking not only about the food, energy and water nexus, but also about the environmental nexus that's related to that, is that you can have a very good collaboration, and you can use the nexus as an input there on making decisions between those different sectors. In this case, energy, food and water sector. But also, I think another very strong point of the nexus is that you can use it over boundaries, sometimes administrative boundaries, sometimes transboundary issues. And I think the strong fact is that the nexus can be used also in a way how you can appreciate the different values that are there. So you're not only discussing, for example, in a water treaty, the distribution of water or the partitioning of water, but you can also discuss the potential benefits that are coming out of that. So becoming a trade on food, on energy, but also other resources that are there. So I think there's a very strong link in this water nexus that you can use actually to create collaboration. Then going a little bit to, I think, what's happening at the global level. One of them is the COP29 that took place in Baku. Also in that COP, or just before that COP, there was a report that was released, and I'm bringing this to the table here because I think there is a strong link actually to the environmental side of this nexus that we're talking about. And that has to do with the requirements of water if we're introducing renewable energy sources. I will not go into detail, but I would like to just let you show, this table tells you a little bit about the different amounts of water that you need, but also how much carbon emissions are prevented by introducing those different efforts. The reason to bring it to the table, and I think that was also the reason why it was brought to the attention in COP29, is that there is this linkage there. So you have to be aware, if you make a certain decision about how you would like to develop the reduction of emissions, that it has an impact also on the water that's required for those different measures, but also the amount of water that it can give if you introduce such a measure. So again, this nexus, I think, is an important point here. Then, just to bring it a little bit back to the ground, to ourselves as human beings, because we are also part of those decisions. These are the definitions that are sometimes used for when do you have water stress, when are you talking about water scarcity, and when do you have absolute scarcity. So those are some sort of guiding numbers. Now, if you look in the same report, you will also find that they also say that for the production of food, you need roughly between 2,000 and 5,000 cubic meters per person per year. which is already quite high if you compare it about this water scarcity issues and water stress. So you can see that this partitioning of water and where you need it in the nexus is I think, a quite strong and important one. I just took it as an example. Both my colleague Bishwa here and myself, we're living in the Netherlands. I don't know exactly how much water he's using, but I can tell you that roughly in the Netherlands, on average, we use 36 cubic meters per person per year. It's just in the household. So that's drinking water, washing, and maybe cleaning your car once every month. We don't do that too often. So then you get numbers like this. But that shows you that there is such a big importance also of other things that we need as human beings, where we also require water for. So making decisions from the consumer side is also an important decision that we make. Also this morning there was some talks about that. This is about the water footprint, which was actually developed at our institution a long time ago. But this shows you a little bit, don't take the numbers as too absolute, but I think it shows you the difference between the choices that you make. So that has to do with food, but it also has to do with a lot of other decisions that we make as consumers, how we can think about what is required there. There's another report that I would like to ask your attention for that came out just a few months before. It's the report that's called The Economics of Water. In that Economics of Water, there are 9 recommendations. Recommendation number 2 is a recommendation to see if on average, it's under discussion, we should use 1,460 cubic meters per person per year. Much lower than the numbers that you see on top. So if we want to get there, that means that we have to introduce a lot of different measures to achieve that. So there's a long way ahead, I think. In this particular report, there are some recommendations. Again, I will not go into detail, but I would like to advise you, have a look at it. I think it's quite interesting. Just a few things out of there that at least was important for me. That's from recommendation number 4. And that talks about that we need innovations, but that we also need capacity building and we need investments. Also related to that, and I would like to stress that because I know that investments, everybody knows that there's also a lot of money going on the table that's being available. One of the problems with investments that investors are looking for bankable projects. Related to bankable projects, there's a return on investment. I think that a lot of things that we're doing in the water sector, and that's required there, and that's also coming in this report, that's why I like that, is that you can't do that on the short term. You need a long term, actually, approach where you appreciate the economic and social benefits that are coming back to you in the long term. And then I'm talking about 10 to 30 years there. Another point that I would like to is recommendation number 7, and that's again about long term, but there I pinpointed the one on intergenerational. So how do you act between different generations and what are their values and benefits? But also the socio-economic and environmental benefits. So I would like to stress that as well. But how do you do that? So there, I think in 2020, the United Nations also proposed this accelerator framework for SDG 6, also notifying that SDG 6 is lagging behind quite a lot by achieving its targets, and that there are 5 accelerator pillars in there. One is financing, one is innovations, one is governance, one is data information, and one is capacity development. You need them all 5. You can't just work on one of them, but you will need all of them. I want to concentrate a little bit on capacity development there. Here, if we really want to make a sort of a quantum leap, or if we want to, say, get away a little bit from the slow increase and improvement that we're needing, we need a change. And I personally think, and I think there are more people that think that as well, that capacity development and capacity developing can help doing that. But one of the other problems that we're facing is we're going into new generations. Myself, some other people here in the room, we're belonging actually to a generation that's sometimes called the baby boom. We're leaving the room soon, and a lot of colleagues are leaving there already. But the new generations come in. The new generations look a little bit different at what is important and what they value. So they also require a different approach there. And coming from the water sector, what I see is that in a lot of countries, including the Netherlands, there is a lack of interest from young people in water, both in the way how they value water, but also an interest to study water. At the same time, I see the challenges in the water sector only becoming bigger. So I think we need more people working in the water sector. It's not only about money, I think it's also about making the water sector more interesting for people to be there. I think we should try, and people working in the water sector here, to make it so interesting that if you have a coffee break or you're visiting your grandmother, the first thing you talk about is what you're doing in the water sector. So that is my ambition, and that's where I would like to look for, next to the fact that I think we do have to think about these investments that have a long-term return on investment. Just one example there, why I think it's a very good decision to do that. I think if you make an investment in your training career, and I think everybody here in the room have done that, that's the orange color code here. So that is when either yourself or your family or you get a loan, you do an investment in your education. That is returned in your lifetime, and then you go to, here there is a retirement age of 65. In some countries it's a little bit longer than that, or sometimes a little bit shorter. You get 3 times back what you invested in your education. But this is not only the most important part. More important is even that if you go actually to all other social benefits that you get there, so meaning better health, meaning less criminality, meaning more productivity.
Professor Moose, I'm sorry
this is
to intervene.
last slide.
Okay.
Yes?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So you see a return of investment that goes 10 times this one. So every euro or dollar that you put in ends up in $30. And then also if you look at benefits on the fiscal benefits, you also get a higher tax income and other benefits that are there for society. So in the end, that's $300 that you get back for every euro that you spend on education training. So I think on the economic side, I think it should be beneficial to do that. I know that there are some other things that may play a role in there why this is not happening as much as it should, but that would be my advice. So I think that what we're talking about today is we're trying to connect actually the water, energy, food nexus. I think we can do that by pushing it using the same accelerator framework that was introduced by SDG 6. Maybe something that could be a discussion later on for the afternoon is, okay, how is that now about atmospheric flow? You have heard maybe about the atmospheric rivers. I think they should also enter in this nexus because they are part of our water cycle and we should start thinking about that. Last thing, I would like to invite you, if you're interested in capacity development, we organize for the last 35 years, every 5 years, a capacity development symposium in Delft in the Netherlands. It will take place next year from 2 to 4th of July, so quite welcome. It will be a hybrid event, so you can do that either from here or you're welcome to visit us in Delft. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you for inviting us all. And I completely align with what you said about intergenerational differences, social equity, and capacity building. It's definitely very important. And I have a very eminent panel here with me. So please, if you can introduce the panel once, then I'll take over from you.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all once again. We warmly welcome Mr. Saraswati Prasad. He's currently Senior Advisor to UN Ops, a senior retired IAS officer who served in various leadership roles in the Government of India and also the Government of Assam. He brings extensive experience in government, policy, formulation, and development administration. We warmly welcome Dr. Kapil Narula, who's Senior Analyst at the Breakthrough Agenda Climatic Champions team. He's a distinguished energy expert with extensive experience in energy economics policy and sustainability, and has held various roles, including Economic Affairs Officer at the United Nations, Advisor Energy at Niti Aayog, and Senior Researcher and Lecturer at the University of Geneva. We warmly welcome Dr. Rajan Sudesh Ratna. He is Deputy Head and Senior Economic Affairs Officer, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, that is the UNESCAP. A renowned Indian economist and a civil servant, Dr. Ratna leads research policy advisory and capacity building initiatives at UNESCAP. A warm welcome to you. And of course, the esteemed moderator for this session, Dr. Shweta Tyagi, is currently Chief Functionary with the India Water Foundation, Her expertise lies in strategic planning of partnership creation and coordination, integrating policy advocacy and community-centric approaches to promote innovative solutions for sustainable development. With that, I hand it over to the esteemed moderator. It's over to you.
Thank you so much, Mandeep. You're doing a great job, by the way. And so I have Dr. Ratna here with me, and since you have been working so much with women entrepreneurs throughout the region, the sub-region, South and West Asia Pacific region, so I would like to know what role do cross-disciplinary research and innovation hubs play in fostering collaboration, especially if we talk about the water, energy, environment nexus. If you can just throw some light on this, and also technology, strategy for sustainable management of this nexus. If you can just briefly tell them. I know it's a big question and it takes time, but briefly if you can.
Thank you, Shotaji, and I give all the organizers, of course we are also one of the co-organizers for this event, for giving me this opportunity. Before dwelling on this issue of water, energy, environment nexus and multi-sectoral dialogue, let me stress one point. And coming from UN, we talk about sustainable development goals. So if we look the area of South and Southwest Asia where we are working, and if you look SDG 6, which is talking about clean water and sanitation, goal 6.4.2, which is about a water stress, 6.6.1, which is permanent water body extent, is regressing. That means the progress for this sub-region is going in a negative direction. We are far, far behind the targets on goal 6, especially on 6.3.1, which is wastewater safety treatment, 6.5.1, integrated water resources management, and 6B1, importantly, which is about the policies and procedure for participative water and sanitation management. Now, if you see energy, which is clean and affordable energy, again, for this region, the renewable energy share is also going in a negative direction. That means the energy demand and production is increasing, but the mix coming from the green energy in the total energy mix the growth is much lesser than the conventional energy, and therefore this is another area where we are lagging behind. Now, water and environment are two things which you cannot control through the boundaries. So when we have to talk about a multi-sectoral dialogue, I'm not talking about, or I'm not emphasizing about a dialogue within the country, but because it has a cross-border implications, multi-sectoral dialogue is important to be initiating across the boundaries. And why so is because water can bring, excessive water can bring floods. Control of water across the border may bring drought. Environment, air pollution also can have cross-boundary implications, and the countries have talked about their net zero, including in India. And therefore, all these issues cannot be addressed in a localized manner. Now, if you see certain targets, which I said we have been lagging behind, much behind. Bringing the policies, all the government, every government policy is supposed to be good at given moment of time, but it still lag certain things because of the lack of stakeholder engagement. For the last 2-3 years, we have been working at the border areas, which has energy implication, which has cross-boundary pollution, air pollution implications. We will be working on cross-border dimensions of water. And what we found was, and it came out not only for India, but even certain countries in the neighborhood, that there is a total kind of a disconnect between the policy making at the capital and the people and communities at the border. Many people at the border and the communities are not aware of these policies. Even government agencies which are there at the borders, they have different challenges which they face, which can have a local solution. And unless it leads to multi-sectoral dialogue and discussion, and some we are taking proud. And thanks, our head Mikiko is also here smiling. Going to the ground level, working with these agencies have been those early harvest of low-hanging fruits which we are able to deliver. And therefore, these multi-stakeholder dialogues, not only within the country, between the policy makers and different segments of the society for whom these policies are being made, because of the cross-border implications, say for water I was talking about, can we have some kind of water use efficiency mechanism which can be cross-border implication? Can we have a forecasting on the flood through an early warning system? We have seen ISCAP has facilitated after tsunami an early warning system for all these countries, and it really reaped the benefit for the social benefit to the people. So if you want many types of conflict resolution or anticipating resolution of the possible conflict which may come up in the future, some possible disaster which can be tackled through the early warning system, and bringing all inclusive social benefits, we talked about leaving no one behind in the morning, that is important, and that can come only through the multi-sector dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ratna. And you have aptly presented how disconnected sometimes the policy gets between stakeholders and policymakers. There's a huge disconnect. So we have to cover that disconnect, and UNSCAPE is doing a great job in the northeastern part of the country, where you are already, connecting with the stakeholders and bringing in policy level approaches for them. So now we have another policymaker who has worked in the government for quite a long time, Mr. Prasad. So I would like to know your experiences in government, especially the interconnection in water, energy, environment challenges, if we take the context of India. So, please.
Thank you, Dr. Shweta. It's indeed a privilege to address this esteemed gathering today. I'm representing UNOPS at the moment. It's an organization that partners with countries to deliver sustainable and resilient solutions. India, with its rich heritage, diverse landscapes, and immense potential, it stands at a critical juncture in addressing the complex nexus of water, energy, and environment. Let us begin with a very sobering thought that all the systems that provide us clean drinking water, energy, and healthy environment, they are all intertwined. And all of them are under great stress. We all recognize that. The choices that we make in any one sector invariably affects the other, and sometimes adversely. And if we fail to recognize and address these interdependencies, we risk ourselves, we risk perpetuating unsustainable practices that jeopardize not just the planet, but the humanity. Let me give you an example from the experience that I've had in the Ministry of Steel. In fact, post-retirement also I've been working associated with them in developing taxonomy for green steel, which is essentially, most of you would realize that steel making is a very carbon intensive exercise, and world over there are attempts to decarbonize the sector. So I'm associated with one of the task forces where we were trying to define what a green steel should be. Now, let me admit that in the exercise that was going on for the last about 1 year, we hardly ever thought about the relationship between reducing the carbon footprint in steel production with possible impact on the water footprint that this change in technology might have. So, but I mean, the point is that we are often, even at the highest level, not very conscious of the interdependencies. So we need to be conscious about that. So that's what I'm trying to say, that the nexus is not just a theoretical concept, but it's a reality for all of us. It's the water that sustains the crops, energy that powers our homes and industries, and the environment that nurtures us all. It is also about the choices that we make today to ensure a secure and sustainable future. India is home to about 18% of the world's population and has access to just about 4% of the freshwater resources that we have. Indian agriculture is heavily dependent on an irrigation system which is largely flood irrigation, which is leading to a lot of water wastage. 80% of the fresh water that we use in this country goes into agriculture. And there are huge possibilities of improvement in this sector. The over-extraction of groundwater, coupled with erratic monsoon patterns, have already led to water stress in many regions. India is also making tremendous strides in expanding energy access. So energy production, whether it is thermal or it's hydropower, they all are very, very closely dependent on the water use. So it is crucial that we realize this and make sure that we have both the water and the energy security. Providing safe drinking water to the vast population that we have is a challenge. The Jal Jeevan mission of the Government of India is a very, very significant flagship program. But still, a large number of challenges remain. There are areas where you have water-stressed areas where access is still a problem. Even when you build these water supply schemes, there are huge problems of operation and maintenance of these areas. The sustainability of the sources, ensuring that the water sources are not contaminated and sustained. So these are the challenges. So the environment which underpins both water and energy system is equally stressed. Depleting groundwater, polluted rivers, and shrinking wetlands not only threaten biodiversity, but also compromise the resources on which our populations and economies depend. So the interconnections of water, energy, and environment call for an integrated approach. India, with its ambitious development agenda, cannot afford to tackle these issues in silos. Agriculture, as I mentioned, uses a lot of water. There are huge potential. There is a huge potential to economize on water use in agriculture. Sprinkler systems and drip irrigation systems can lead to substantial improvement. In this context, I think this per drop, more crop initiative is also of a significant step. However, scaling of these technologies and reaching it to all the areas requires a lot of creating more awareness and assistance to the farmers.
Sorry, sir, but I'll intervene in between because the time is running
Okay.
away, and I have one more speaker to ask a question to.
Okay,
so if
okay.
you can just conclude.
Yes, I'll do that. So essentially what one is trying to see is that we need to have an integrated approach in designing policies that are that break the silos. We need to develop capacities. We need to cooperate. At UNOPS, we are ready to partner with the state agencies and with the governments in providing resilient infrastructure for sustainable development. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, sir. So, Kapil, finally, since Sir spoke about COP29, I'll ask you a question related to that only. You traveled to Baku. So what do you think, how can global frameworks and local initiatives, work together to bring in the change that we all are looking at and to implement scalable solutions, especially, for challenges related to the water, energy and environment nexus? So if you can just briefly tell us.
Thank you, Shweta, and just standing on the shoulders of my esteemed colleagues. As I see it, the food, water, and energy problem is not a resource problem. It's a problem of inequity. It's about inequitable access. It's about intergenerational and intra-generational inequity. So we need to right this wrong. And therefore, the global frameworks and their adaptation or adoption into the national strategies. And how do we do that? So I'll just jump into some of the solutions which I see have a great potential and value. So first thing is that everyone spoke about the interconnectivity, and I see it as a multiverse of energy, environment, food, and water. Actions are happening together in all these domains, and they are interconnected at the same time. So let me suggest some of the solutions. The first thing is that there's probably a lack of centralized water data sharing platforms, which are easily accessible. Now, at Niti Aayog, there was an effort to combine all of the energy data, and probably something of that sort needs to be done at local, national, regional, and then global level. And platform which is easily accessible, where universities, companies can add data and take data, an open source database. Second is, we need to look at projects and how do we incentivize some of these projects which enhance resource efficiency. And how can we look at some of the market mechanisms to increase this resource efficient water use. At the moment, the challenge is that pricing of water is inadequate. And we have companies which extract groundwater. In fact, when I looked up, India is one of the cheapest countries where, in terms of pricing of tap water. And equivalently, the price of tap water is up to 100 times more in Russia at Moscow. So how can we, unless we get water efficiency ingrained into our water distribution systems, water treatment systems, will not be able to solve this problem. Another aspect is on domestic water use. Now, when we look at, we have different types of domestic water use for drinking, for sanitation, for health, and so on, for watering plants. But here in our cities, we are using the same treated water for all our applications. Now, how can we address that challenge? And if you look at the Middle East countries, and I stay in Dubai, that several of the irrigation systems, and you have a lot of greenery there, are from treated water. But here, we are looking at the same use of water in households, for washing, for cleaning, for utilization of other domestic needs. While at University of Geneva, we even looked at how can we extract the rejected heat content from domestic hot water or some of the water which is wasted, and how can we use that rejected water, which is at about 30, 40 degrees, to drive, to extract heat and drive heat pumps. So these are some of the technological solutions, which can solve some of the problems. The other part I wanted to touch upon is, integrated city planning and ecosystem management approaches. And that's extremely, extremely important because we are going back to the nature. And I'll give an example again from Switzerland, where there was in the 60s a move to canalize or cementize or concretize some of the rivers and canals. And now we are going back and removing those embankments so that there is nature positive approach and you can recharge the groundwater and there's way for the river to flow. In terms of one of the principles, we need to go ahead from the current strategy of embedding doing no harm principle to nature positive or regenerative systems. Because we need to understand there are two issues with water. One is about stocks and one is about flows. Anything which extracts more water than replenishes it is not sustainable. And our panelists have talked about unsustainability. So we need to see that all our industrial as well as domestic applications need to be not only or should move to a regenerative approach. How do we recharge all of these systems? And lastly, I will just touch upon some of the issues of how innovation can help in streamlining some of these systems and getting efficiency in water distribution as well as treatment. And here I would like to point out the role of technological innovations, but also financial innovation in making access to water cheaper, as well as making use of market mechanisms for water. And for that, policy support is critical and essential. I'll stop here, Shweta. Thank you.
Thank you, Kapil. So, Professor Moores, any closing comment from you?
I think I would like, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers. I also would like to thank the colleague members sitting here at the table for their remarks that are there. I also hear a lot of alignment, actually, of the ideas and the ways forward. So I do hope that together we can really realize that. And I think the challenge that we're facing a little bit is that the ideas and the willingness is there, but we also need the implementation. And I think that's maybe the next step. I referred to a conference that we have every 5 years. The conference before was also related to implementation science. It's a science coming actually from the medical sector. And it's interesting because in medicines you also need this implementation and you want to do it faster. I think we need that here as well. So I would like to maybe recommend that maybe we can have a look at that and learn from that to see how we can also speed up implementation. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moores, and definitely we will all look into it, what you were talking of. And so after hearing to all the speakers today, I can just say that fostering coordination and coordinated actions to address the water energy environment nexus is, I think, the most important and imperative thing which all of us have to take together. And governments, policymakers play a critical role, of course, in driving integrated resource management by designing cohesive policies and incentivizing sustainable practices, ensuring cross-sectoral alignment. But the disconnect with the stakeholders need to be addressed a little more, which is being seen at ground level, at grassroots level, which one of or two of my speakers have already spoken about. Successful collaborations among public, private, and civil society stakeholders demonstrate how diverse expertise and resources can converge to address complex challenges effectively. Scalable solutions require a synergy between global frameworks like the SDGs and local initiatives that consider community-specific needs. And of course, finance. We cannot do without finance. Technical capacity is very important, but so is financial capacity, which needs to be integrated either through blended finance or different options that we have now these days. So let us all explore how these elements can come together to advance sustainable solutions for the water, energy, and environment nexus, ensuring resilience, equity, and long-term environmental stewardship, so that we can also address intergenerational and intragenerational social inequity that has been pointed out by all the speakers here. Thank you so much. Thank you, my wonderful panel. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, esteemed moderator. Thank you to the esteemed panelists for a wonderful discussion. I'm sure you all enjoyed that discussion. So it's time
Can
now.
we have a group photograph?
Yes, please. Can you please all join us front and center?